currently working?
I'm just going to record. Sorry. Thank you. Just hit the record button. Thanks.
So yes, just a quick intro first. As Jo said, I'm Suzanne and we work together at M&G. I've worked there as an Agile coach and delivery lead for the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent quite a bit of time at Skyscanner doing a similar role as well. And I've tried like so many different types of time management over like the last 10 years, and nothing has really stuck with me until I found this method. And I basically would try stuff, and then as soon as things got a bit chaotic, a bit hectic, I'd just drop all process and then I would abandon my time management system. So about 7 years ago, I stumbled across personal Kanban and just a few other things that I used alongside it, and that has really stuck with me day in, day out over the last 7 years. So I'm hoping today by sharing this with you, you might be able to pick up some things that will help you in your working life or in your personal life, just from taking that kind of feeling of chaos to a feeling of calmness. So just a couple of things. If you don't have a pen and paper, it'd be really handy if you could grab one. The other option is you just use your notepad on your computer, but sometimes it's nice for some of the exercises that we'll do to have a bit of paper. And then also, if you do have a Trello account, or if you have access to Microsoft, you could open up either Trello or Microsoft Planner and follow along with some of the things that I'll do when I set up the personal Kanban. Or if you want, you can just listen or use Post-it notes and a Sharpie. So I'm just going to start off by giving you a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to cover in this session today, just so that you know what to expect. So it is going to be interactive, but you can interact as little or as much as you like. So if you want to just sit and chill and listen, that's absolutely fine. If you want to do some of the quizzes and the exercises, then that's fine too. It's totally up to you. I know it's the end of the day, and many of you will have had a busy day today. So I'm going to start off with just a little bit of self-reflection. So we'll do a quiz just to see how good you feel your time management is. And then I'm going to start talking about multitasking. And often we see in things like job adverts that you must be a good multitasker and it's seen as a sought after skill. But there's actually a lot of research that shows that it's not the most effective way to work. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll do a quick exercise that will help you whenever you feel like you're overwhelmed or your brain's full and you can't focus. I'll give you this exercise that you can use in these times to help you. And then after that, because we're going to be doing personal Kanban in this session, I'll do a quick intro just to regular Kanban. And I'm sure a lot of you, because you're in this Agile community, will be familiar with Kanban, but I'll just do that briefly for those of you who are not. And then for the rest of the session, we'll actually just focus on setting up your own personal Kanban board. So I'll just take you through step by step how to do it. And then on top of that, I'll layer over some other techniques and sort of prioritization techniques as well. And then I'll just finish off with a few time management skills and give anyone else the opportunity to share any tips that you have or just to ask any questions that you want to ask as well. If you do have a question, you're more than welcome to shout it out if there's anything quick that you want answered, but I'll make sure there's time at the end of this session for any Q&A as well. So I think we'll just get started. So I'm going to start off with a bit of self-reflection. So as I said, if you've got a pen and paper handy, that would be great, or just a notepad on your computer. So I'm going to go through the questions in this quiz one by one. There's a total of 7 questions. And as I go through them, I'd just like you to rate yourself from 1 to 5, where 1 means that you never do this, and 5 means that you always do it, or you do it on a regular or daily basis. So if you just write down the number 1 to 5 for each of these questions, because we'll need to add them up at the end. So the first question is, do you feel like you've got too many things in progress at the same time? Are you a multitasker? So if you write down 1, if this never applies to you, write down 5 if this is you on a day-to-day basis, or otherwise just choose a number somewhere in the middle. And then the second question is around, how do you keep track of the things that you have got to do? Do you find that you use a mix of things? So maybe you write stuff in a notepad, on a post-it note, put it in Outlook, put it in your calendar, put it in your Kanban board, or do you just have this one place to hold everything? So if you never use more than one place to hold all your actions, choose 1. If you always do this, you can choose 5 or anywhere in between. And then the third question is about prioritization. So how often do you find it really difficult to try to prioritize your work? 1 if you're lucky and this never happens to you, or 5 if you're finding that this is happening on a daily basis. And then the fourth question, this is around if you've got some work that you've planned, maybe you've got a deadline for it, how often does something crop up that takes you completely off track? So how often do you not get your planned work finished due to your unplanned work? So 1, if that never happens, and 5, if you're finding that this is happening on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and then question 5. How often do you find yourself thinking about all the tasks and all the things that you have to do and feeling overwhelmed at the thought of it, or maybe feeling a bit stressed out? So 1, if you're the lucky person that never feels overwhelmed with all the things you have to do, and 5, if you're finding this is happening to you every day. And then the 6th one, how often are you distracted? So how often are you working on something and you get a Slack message or an email notification or a text message or a Facebook notification, and suddenly you're off down a rabbit hole and you forget what you were working on in the first place? So 1, if this never happens to you, if you're very disciplined, and 5, if this always happens to you. And then the last question is, how often do you forget to do things that are assigned to you? So if you're in a meeting and you get an action, how often do you forget to do that? So 1, if that never happens to you, and again 5, if it always does. If you're not on mute, if you're able to go on mute, that'd be really good, because I've just got a wee bit of an echo when I'm speaking. So that's all 7 questions there. And if you just take a moment and add up your total score, so your score will be between 7 and 35, and the lower the score, the kind of more organized in general you are. So if you just take a moment just to add that up. And then this bit really is just for fun. It's not anything scientific, but look at your score and see which category you fall into. If you're 7 to 10, then this is amazing, and we need you to share our secrets with us. On the other end of the scale, you might be between 29 and 35, and everything is just extremely chaotic. And if you don't mind, if you can share your score range on Slido, and this is completely anonymous, it's just to get a sense of the people attending this session where you are. If you go to slido.com, just in your browser, on your phone, whatever you want, and if you type in personal Kanban, you should get onto a poll, and that poll will just ask you to select which one of these categories you fall into. So I'll just give everyone a minute to do that. And I should hopefully be able to just share this on my browser as well, if I can work the screen sharing in Zoom. Okay, let me just... So far we've got 12 responses, and it looks like 50% of you at the moment are in the room for improvement category. We've got about 30% in the good category, so you've got a good system in place. We've got a couple of folks who are in the chaotic, and we have a person who's in the great category as well, so quite a mix of different people. So with this session, I'm not promising any magic bullets, but if you found yourself to be in that kind of chaotic or room for improvement category, then hopefully you'll get something out of this that's going to help you. I'm just going to go onto that Slido poll now and just hopefully be able to share that with you. Yeah, so you can see, hopefully you can see my browser there and see the results on that there. And then just as like a bit of context, so before I started using personal Kanban, when I did this quiz, I would come out in the like sort of 23 to 28 area, so definitely a lot of room for improvement. But more recently, when I've been using personal Kanban consistently, in the kind of 11 to 16, so it's definitely made a difference to like how how my organization feels on a day-to-day basis. So there's something wrong with my Mac today. So every time I click a button, it just seems to do the spinny thing. So while I wait for it to come back so I can change slide, did anyone find anything out of that quiz that stuck out for them, or anything surprising in there? Feel free just to shout out if there was something. Okay, so we're back now. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about multitasking, and judging by some of the people being in that kind of needs improvement area of the quiz, there's probably some of you who do practice multitasking. And as I said earlier, it's quite often seen as a sought after skill, and often you see this on job adverts and things like that. So I want to ask you this question. Do you feel like your brain has too many tabs open? Are you quite often juggling multiple things at the same time? And although as I said, this feels like a really great skill to have, what actually happens is your brain cannot work on multiple things at the same time. Your brain is actually context switching, and it's jumping between all these different things. And as you jump from one thing to another, what you'll typically find is that it's going to take you a little bit of time to get up to speed again. And this is especially true if you're doing something creative, if you're writing software, if you're designing something, if you're trying to think about a big problem, you're going to find it's going to take you a bit of time to get into the swing of things. So the more that you multitask, the longer everything is going to take you. So if you think about the work that you're doing for your end customer, so whether that's a user or a customer of the software that you work on, or somebody internal in your company is your customer, if you're working on 10 things at a time, that's going to have a negative impact on your customer, because it's going to take longer for them to get anything from you, because 10 things being worked on in parallel are going to take longer on average than 2 things. And then the other issue with it is that it causes you stress. So the more things that you try to work on in parallel, the more you're going to be thinking about them. They're going to be consuming your energy and your attention, and you're much more likely to feel stressed and overwhelmed about that. And that brings me to something that called the zygonic effect. So this is a psychologist from the former Soviet Union called Bluma Zygonic, and she did a lot of studies in this area. And she found that adults have a 90% chance of remembering interrupted and incomplete thoughts or actions over those that have been seen through to completion. So what this means in practice is that if we finish a task, we stop thinking about it, it stops consuming our energy. But if we don't finish a task, we yearn for the completion of it, and it holds our attention, and we're thinking about it, or maybe even dreaming about it in some cases. And one of the side effects of this is that we'll start to look for things that are a lower priority, or maybe things that are quicker or easier for us to do. So we can get that kind of dopamine rush of finishing something, or we can stop thinking about it. And that means we're not always, going to be working on the most high priority things at a time. So that's kind of another just issue around multitasking. So her research was done with waiters and waitresses, looking at the orders that they remembered, and if they were completed or not. So just something to think about if you are a multitasker. Have a bit of reflection on it and think about, is this the best thing for you to do, both from the perspective of your customers, but also from your own personal kind of stress levels and things like that. So that brings me to an exercise that we're going to take just 5 minutes to do just now. It's called the mind sweep, and it's a really simple, but it's a very powerful exercise. If you ever feel like you're just overwhelmed, you've got thoughts swimming around in your mind, you've got so many things to do, and particularly on a day where you've got to focus, maybe you're in a workshop or you've got a deadline, this can be a great exercise. So what we're going to do is take 5 minutes just now, again with a pen and paper. You can do this on your computer as well, but there's something nice about just writing stuff down. And I just want you to take that 5 minutes and write down anything that's holding your attention right now. So that could be an idea, a task that you know you've got to do, a project you want to get started, or maybe it's just someone you need to remember to speak to about something, or an appointment, or just anything in general that's holding your attention right now. So just write that down. This is just for yourself. I'm not going to ask anyone to share what they wrote. And I will start a timer and put it on the screen, but there'll be a massive delay because my Mac doesn't seem to be very happy today. So if everyone just wants to get started with that just now, and I'll let you know when we've got a couple of minutes left. And do shout out if you've got any questions about this exercise.
Suzanne, how does the slider go on to the next question?
So this is actually on my PowerPoint, and I've got a problem with my Mac just now where it's hanging, so I didn't mean to go on to the next slide. So I'm just going to give it a minute, and then hopefully I'll be able to come out of it. But yeah, this is a Slido poll that we're going to do once you finish this exercise. So I'll set that up just now.
And
So I've got a timer on the screen. We've got about 4 minutes left. So if you just continue to write down.
And sorry, could you just remind me what we're writing down? Because I just had my dog who had an important job in her mouth.
No worries, no worries. So hopefully you can see that slide now that I'm sharing. So it's basically just anything that's holding your attention, tasks that you have to do, projects that you have to start, anyone you have to speak to, just things that are kind of on your mind as things that you need to do. And you can choose just work things or work and personal, whatever helps.
Thank you.
And we've got just over 3 minutes left, so I will be quiet now and let people get a little bit of time to focus. So we've got about 1 minute left. So if you've still got things on your mind that you're writing down, please do continue. And if you've finished, just go along again to Slido, the same code, personal Kanban, and just share how many things you wrote down when you did the mind sweep. Okay, so that's the 5 minutes up. So if you haven't done so already, if you just go to that poll and just share how many things that you wrote down. I can see at the moment it's kind of an even split between 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20. And is anyone happy to share, was this enough time for you to write down everything that was holding your attention, or could you have kept going? Or just put something in the chat if you like.
We could have kept going. Depends how much detail and how much we break those big chunks down.
Yeah. So so I found this exercise, as I said, it's quite useful when if you have to really focus one day and you just feel like you're thinking of other things and you can't concentrate. Sometimes just the act of writing them down and just putting that bit of paper aside can help you, to empty your mind a bit of them all, and then that's there to go back to when you need to. And I try and do this like on a regular basis as well, and use it as input to my Kanban. So what I'm going to do now is just give you a brief introduction to Kanban. I'm not going to go into the slide share mode because my Mac just can't cope with it at the moment, but hopefully that's big enough for everyone to see. So as I said earlier, I think a lot of you will be familiar with Kanban being in the Lean and Agile community, but just in case you've not come across it, I'll share a little bit about it. First of all, the history. It isn't a new thing. It's been around since the 1950s. And this picture here shows Toyota. And you might be familiar with the Toyota production system, which is also known as, later on was known as lean manufacturing. And one of the principles with lean manufacturing is the just-in-time production. So they want to make sure they produce only what's needed when the customer requests it in the right quantities. So in other words, they don't want to build up lots of waste, lots of inventory. And this picture here, this old black and white picture, just shows you what a Kanban board used to look like back in the day. When an order came in from a customer, that physical card would then trigger the release of raw materials that were needed to manufacture the car, and then that would then start the process of manufacturing. And if you loosely translate it in Japanese, it means signboard or billboard. But I don't speak Japanese, so I could be wrong. So that's kind of where it comes from. But over the years, it's been adapted for different types of teams. So most commonly, probably software teams or support teams, but any type of knowledge working teams can benefit from Kanban. So basically, when you use Kanban in a team, the first thing that you do is you visualize the flow of your work. So you think about, when I do a piece of work, what are all the different stages that work goes through? And you can see here, this is just a simple example of a software team. They'll have some work on their backlog, it'll become ready for development, then go into dev, then it'll be ready for testing, you'll put it into testing and it'll be done. So that's just a simplified sort of workflow for software. And there's a big benefit just to doing this and only this. If you visualize the flow, it's much clearer. I read somewhere that the human brain can process visual information something like 60,000 times faster than any other types of information. So being able to see your work there and the progress of it and see where the bottlenecks are is so powerful. It will help you to prioritize your work better as well. So even if you just do this one step, it makes a big difference. And then if you want to go further and really use the principles of Kanban, the next thing you do is to limit your work in progress. So you might hear people talking about WIP limits and what's your WIP limit. And the idea here is, if we go back to the multitasking that I talked about earlier and how multitasking isn't the most effective way to work, what Kanban does is it tries to prevent you from multitasking. So you set yourself a work in progress limit. So imagine here your work in progress limit was 5. If you want to pull a piece of work into the in progress column, and you've already got 5 things in here, the idea is that that stops you doing it, and then you focus on getting one of these 5 things into the done state before you pick something else off your list. And this sounds quite easy in theory, like it should be easy to reduce the number of things a team works on at the one time, but from my experience, it's actually quite difficult. So as an example, I had a team of about 10 engineers, and typically they had 40 to 50 things in progress at the one time. And we decided to implement Kanban, or actually a mix of Kanban and Scrum, and we got them down to 10 things at a time. But it was very difficult, and it took a period of weeks to get that discipline to be able to do that, because it's natural, I think, for humans to want to multitask and work on different things. But it did make a huge difference to their throughput in general, and improved the team's kind of morale overall as well, because they didn't have so much stuff on the go. So that's the second kind of step when you're doing Kanban, is think about your WIP limit. And then if you want to go further than that, it can be really useful to measure the flow. So your throughput, how much stuff are you doing per week or per month? And also, what's your cycle time? What's the average amount of time it takes from a piece of work to get started to get finished? And then finally, you also want to think about improving. So you might want to improve by looking at your processes and improve them, or you might want to improve by spotting bottlenecks using your board and addressing these, or just simply by reducing your WIP limit and improving that way. So that's how Kanban works within a team, just at a very high level. So let's go on now to personal Kanban, and how can you actually use some of these principles from Kanban for your own working life. So as I said before, I think the first thing that you can do is to just visualize that work. And the most simple Kanban you can get is just a Kanban with 3 columns: to do, doing, and done, or maybe you want to call them backlog and progress complete, whatever makes sense to you. And even if you just do this, I think this will help you, because it's much better that all the things you have to do are actually somewhere on a board rather than in your head. But let's take this a little bit further now. So we'll start off with a 3-column Kanban, and then we'll build it up gradually and add in some other techniques that are going to help you as well. So if everyone wants to follow along with me while I do this, please feel free. You can do it in one of these tools, or you could do it just on post-it notes if you want. I'm going to use Trello just as an example. If you've not used Trello before, you just go to trello.com. You can create an account. It's free to use for up to 10 boards. It's a really nice tool, and this is what I use for my personal Kanban. Another alternative, if you have Microsoft installed on your computer, or your work uses Microsoft, they have quite a nice tool called Microsoft Planner. It's a bit like a cut down version of Trello. So it's not got as many fancy features, but it still does the job for personal Kanban. So if you're in Trello, all you need to do is log in and click create your board. If you're using Microsoft Planner, you just log into your kind of main Microsoft area, find the MS Planner tool and click New Plan, and they work in a very similar way. So even though I'm going to demonstrate it with Trello, it will work in a similar way for MS Planner as well. Or you might just want to go down that traditional route of post-it notes and a whiteboard, or even a bit of the wall. And this, I really like this way, because there's something about physically holding onto a post-it note and moving it into the done state. There's something that gives you that bit of satisfaction. So if you're lucky enough to be in the same place all the time, that might be something that you want to think about. But if you're moving maybe sometime in the office, sometime at home, it's probably better to have that electronic version. Another option as well might be Miro. For anyone who uses Miro, they've got a Kanban option within Miro as well. So the first thing I'm just going to ask everyone to do, if you are in one of these tools just now, we'll just set up the most simple Kanban possible by putting in 3 columns: to do, doing, and done, or backlog and progress complete, whatever you fancy. So I'm just going to do this on Trello just now. So I'm just going to call it backlog, and then in progress, and then complete. So that's my kind of 3-column simple Kanban board. If I want to add stuff to it, it's really quick and easy. I can put a task in just by typing it like this. So if you want to, feel free to start to put some of the stuff that came out in your mind sweep exercise and just put it into your backlog or your to-do column. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what should you actually put inside your Kanban board. So a couple of things to think about are, should you put work stuff in it only, or should you put a mix of work and personal stuff? This is entirely up to you. What I do is my Kanban is really focused just on my work, but sometimes I will put something personal in it. So if I really need to remember to do something that day, like maybe make an appointment with the doctor or post a letter, I'll just put it into my personal Kanban board because it's there in front of me. I also actually have a DIY board at home that I assign my husband tasks on, but unfortunately the throughput of that board isn't as good as I want it to be. So just if you're not sure, I would start with just work. And then if it's working for you, if the system's working, you could always just add in personal stuff or have a separate board for that. Depends how hectic your personal life is. And then the other thing to think about is granularity of the things you put on the board. How big or small should the items be? And you don't want it to be so small that like you have this administrative overhead to maintain your Kanban board. You don't want to be going in there every 5 minutes and adding stuff. So just kind of think about what's a sensible size, and it might be a chunk of work that's half a day or a couple of hours. If you're going to put a task in for every email you've got to answer, you're going to drop this system pretty quickly because it's just going to become too much of a hassle to maintain it. So have a think about that, and I think over time you'll probably adapt the way that you use your Kanban. So the next thing we're going to do is add an additional column. So I'm sure everybody gets into that situation where you get blocked on a piece of work. So it might be you need someone to review something for you, or maybe something's broken and you need to get it fixed, or you're relying on a colleague to do part of the work. So I find it quite useful to add an extra column in to your Kanban, and this is a column to represent any items that are blocked. They're not really within your control, or you might want to call it waiting. So if I just put a blocked column here, and then I like to have the blocked column just after the in progress. Some people might prefer to have it before it. Again, completely up to you. And that's a nice place if you have something and you are just stuck on it and you need help, or you're waiting for somebody, you can just drag something into that blocked column. One thing I will say is you don't want that to become a black hole where everything goes into it and never to be seen again. So it's a good idea just to get into that habit of reviewing your blocked list from time to time as well. So that's your blocked column. The next thing we're going to look at is, we are going to be doing Kanban. So let's use that work in progress limit. Let's challenge ourselves and see if we can reduce down our work in progress. So the next thing to think about is, what is a realistic number for you? I went a bit ambitious when I started personal Kanban. I thought, yeah, my WIP limit is going to be 1, and it didn't really work out for me. Now I've managed to get it to 2, and I'm quite strict about it. But it depends where you are just now. So if you currently work on 10 things at a time, it's going to be too ambitious to get down to 2 straight away. So you might want to choose 7. If you work on 5 things, normally maybe you want to get that to 3. And what I would recommend is actually in your in progress column, just put your WIP limit in there as a reminder. So I'm going to put WIP equals 2. And then if I start dragging and dropping my tasks into the in progress column and I start working on them, I'm thinking, oh, I might start this other task. And then that is kind of like a trigger for me to remember, well, actually, I should only have 2 things in progress. So let's try to get this one finished before I move another one in. So it acts to me like almost like a mental trigger where I say, I need to keep it to 2 things at a time, not 5 things at a time. So it can be really helpful to put that WIP limit in there. So you see it every time you drag something into your in progress column. And just review it regularly. Maybe you can get it down to a lower number, and that will benefit you in terms of feeling less stressed, or just benefiting your customer as well, like I said earlier. So the next thing we're going to do is actually start to think about prioritization and how we prioritize things in our Kanban. And when I first started using Kanban, I tried all sorts of weird and wonderful ways of prioritizing. I had different columns for different projects. I had things color-coded with different themes, but it was just too complicated. So I settled on a really simple system. It almost sounds like it's too simple to work, but it has worked for me over the years in different types of jobs. So the first thing that I do on a daily basis, first thing in the morning, I've got my coffee. I say to myself, well, what are the 3 most important things that I need to do today? And I know sometimes I might have 7 things I want to do today, but I force myself to just think of what are the top 3 imagine something comes left field that I'm not expecting and I don't get time to complete everything. What are the 3 things that I absolutely must complete? And it's a good habit to get in because it kind of sets you up for the day ahead, and it forces you to think about just the highest priority things rather than having a massive to-do list. I used to have a notepad with about 15 things I wanted to do in that day. So really be strict with yourself to get that down to 3 if you can. So what I'll do now is add another column, and I'm going to call it today. I'm going to put this column just after my backlog. And then on a daily basis, I'm going to look at what's in my backlog. I'm going to look at what's in my calendar, and then I'll start to populate that with my 3 most important things, or my 3 MITs, as I call them. So that's like the first level of prioritization. So if you can add a column in there just after your to-do list, and that can be your kind of trigger every day to think about what you want to do for the day ahead. And then the next column is kind of a similar style to this, but this time we're thinking about the week ahead. I always think a week is a short enough period that you can plan fairly easily. So if you want to add a column called weekly or this week or whatever makes sense for you, so I'm just going to add that in here, call it this week. And I'm going to just put that right beside the backlog column just before the today. So now you should have 6 columns. So you've got your backlog or your to-do list, you've got your weekly or your this week column, you've got your today for the day ahead, you've got your in progress, you've got a blocked column optionally, and then you've got your done or your complete column. And what I'll do as well on a weekly basis, I usually just do this on a Monday morning as I start to think about what's coming up this week. I might look through my backlog and see, well, what out of these things do I want to get finished this week or have to get finished this week? I'll also look at my calendar and Outlook. I'll see, is there meetings that I need to prepare for? Is there facilitation that I need to plan? And I'll put that in my this week column. So I basically end up with a little plan for the week in that weekly column. Now, as we know, things don't always go according to plan. You get unexpected things that crop up. So you can expect that you'll be adding to that weekly column as the week goes on as well. And you might want to move things back and forward depending on kind of your priorities. So that's kind of all the columns that I'm going to put in this Kanban board. I've kept it quite simple. If you've never used Kanban before, I'd recommend start off with something like this. It's quite simple, and over time as you use it, you can adapt it to work for you and continuously improve it. So let me just show you a way that I prioritize on demand, because it's all very well and good to plan something in advance and to expect that to happen, but in real life we always get unexpected things that come up. So I always ask myself a few questions. If I get a task that somebody assigns me, or someone asks me for help with something, or I just realize that there's something I need to do to meet a certain goal, the first question I ask myself is something on fire? Is it urgent? So this might be something like, somebody gets in touch and says there's a problem in production. Can we get somebody from your team to help out with it? I need to drop everything and focus on that straight away. It really depends on your type of job if this happens to you. Sometimes this will never happen to people, but it's a good question to ask is, do I need to do it now? Because sometimes it's a natural thing. You'll get given something to do and you'll just start doing it straight away. But you don't really need to, because it isn't urgent. If the answer to that is no, you can then ask yourself, do I need to do this today? Do I need to get this done by the end of the day? And this might involve asking the person who's asked you to do it, or if it's your own piece of work that you've just thought up, you can think about, how does this compare to the other things that I've got to do today? If the answer is yes, put it in your today column. You might need to move something back from your today column to your this week column to make room for it. Or you might find you've had a productive day and you've got space, you can put that in anyway. If it's not for today, ask yourself, is it for this week? Do I need to achieve this in the next 5 days? And again, you can just do something similar here. You can add it into your weekly column if it's something you need to finish this week. And then the final question would be, if none of these are true, if it's not something I need to do now, today, or this week, when do I need to do it? And sometimes you'll have a deadline and it'll be further in the future, and you can put that into your to-do or your backlog list. Sometimes you'll just not really know, but you just know it has to be done at some point. And you can just add that in and prioritize it against the other things that are in your list there. Sometimes like it doesn't seem, it doesn't always seem logical to do this. You might want to start grouping things by different projects and themes, but I would encourage you just to try this out when you start to get things on your plate that you need to do. Just have a think about it and ask these 4 questions and see how that impacts your priorities. And you might actually find, like I certainly found, I was changing my behavior a bit, because sometimes I would just take things and do them straight away and I didn't need to, and I actually only needed to do them this week. So it's something that's worth trying out if you've got any problems at the moment with prioritizing. And hopefully the Kanban board and the visual sort of the columns with the different names will help you with both that forward planning on a daily and a weekly basis, but also your planning on demand when you get things on your plate. So that's pretty much all I had to say about the Kanban part of this. So this system hopefully is simple enough for anyone to try out, but I think it is very powerful, and it's really has stuck with me for like the last 7 years. So I'd really encourage you, if you don't have a system just now that works for you, have a try it out for a couple of weeks, and you can always adapt it and see how it works for you. So what I'm going to do just to finish off, I'll spend 5 minutes or so just also sharing some other time management tips. Then after that, I'll have a bit of time for any questions, or if anyone else would like to share any tips, things that have worked for you as well. So my first one is something that has made a big difference to me. It really depends on your job. Are you a person that's in meetings for a lot of the day, or are you getting a lot of creative time to work? If you are someone who is in a lot of meetings, I find it helpful to what I call defragment my diary. So if I don't do this, I end up with all these half an hour, 1 hour, 45-minute meetings spread throughout the day. And if I'm lucky, I get half an hour in between a couple of meetings, and then maybe I'm in 3 meetings in a row, and then I get another half an hour. And I just find that space between the meetings isn't enough to achieve anything major. So I'm just always in this kind of context switching mode of meetings. So what I'll do is I'll go into my diary, my work diary in Outlook, at least 2 weeks ahead, and I'll start to block out some chunks of time. I usually just call it focus time. For you, this could be an hour of time. If that's enough, it could be 2 hours of time. But the benefit of doing this in advance is it encourages, when people are booking meetings with you, that these meetings will kind of be outside your focus time. Obviously, it's not guaranteed. If someone sees that's focus time in your diary, they might actually just put a meeting in on top of it, but you've got a greater chance of having some space in your diary if you do this in advance. So this is probably one of the things that's made one of the biggest differences to me in terms of like time management tips. The second tip, this is one I'm sure has impacted a lot of us, and it's notifications. So you get a little notification to say you've got an email or a Slack message or Microsoft Teams chat, or somebody's tagged you on Facebook, and we're curious by nature. So we're going to go in and we're going to have a look at it. And it's really easy then just to forget what you were doing in the first place, and you're off down a rabbit hole. Half an hour suddenly has passed and you've been really unfocused in terms of your task. So this is a tip that kind of works really well alongside the blocking out the focus time in your diary. Maybe you could consider during that focus time, you snooze these applications, or even shut them down. Most of us probably don't have jobs where we need to be available every minute of every day. People expect us that we might take a while to answer questions. So if you can do this, this is going to stop you going down that rabbit hole, and just give you that really focused time to get something done. The third technique is something called Pomodoro technique. It's really simple, but there is someone who wrote a whole book on it of about 150 pages. And the way it works is you slice your time into half an hour slots. You pick a task, eliminate all distractions, turn off all these notifications, set a timer for 25 minutes, and you really focus on getting something done in that 25 minutes. Then when you finish, you take 5 minutes as a break, and then you simply repeat it. So some people like to do 1 or 2 Pomodoros in a day. Some people will do 4 Pomodoros in a row with 5 minutes in between each, and then have a longer break at the end of that. But definitely, again, something worth trying out if you're finding it hard to focus. And this might help you get things done more effectively. So, and then the next one is something that is really difficult to do. A lot of people want to be collaborative, they want to be helpful. If someone asks you to do something, then it's often easiest just to say yes, I'm happy to help you with that. So just really think about, you know, how is this impacting your own work? Are you saying yes too much to people and you're finding that this is distracting you, you're never getting your work done or meeting your goals? And practice sometimes just saying no. You don't actually need to use the word no. You could, you know, just ask for more information, ask is there someone else that could do it potentially, when do you need it by? Sometimes thinking about it as saying yes more slowly. So when someone asks you to do something, it's not an instant, yes, I'll do it. It's a, let me think about that. Can I get more information? Just stalling a bit and trying to work out if it's the right thing for you to do. And then the final tip, this one isn't so much about productivity, but it's about creativity. And there was a study by Stanford University, and they actually got people to go for a walk, and they measured lots of different hormones and chemicals and gave people tests and things. And they found that people were more creative when after they'd had a walk for a while. And I think it's easy to get into the situation, especially working from home, where you're just on your computer all day, you're locked up in the same office, you're on meeting after meeting. But if you can block in some time as well in your diary to go for a walk, if you can do it outside, all the better. But I know if you're in Scotland like me, then it might not always be ideal to go for a walk in the pouring rain. But they did find that this also worked if you were walking indoors, if you were on a treadmill. They noticed a difference in people's creativity when they did that. So, and I do find that if I go out for a walk after about 15 or 20 minutes, I do start to have better ideas than I do if I'm in my working office. So that's just a few tips. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming along to this session, and just ask you if you're able to go into Slido again, and I'm just going to move on this to the next poll. And I just wanted to see if any of the attendees has any other time management tips or anything that you'd like to share, anything that has worked for you. It's a very personal thing, I think. Some things that work for some people don't work for others. So if you want to either shout something out, you can add it into the Zoom chat, or if you want, you can just put it into this Slido poll. Pig wrestling. I'm intrigued by that. Can anyone say more about that pig wrestling?
It's a book that was recommended by my daughter, who is a sports psychologist, and it's a fable called Pig Wrestling, little pink book, and in it talks about how to handle when you're given a task, how to go about the thinking process to decide what you're going to do with that task. Are you, is it something that you have to worry about? Is it something that you've done before, and so on? It gives you this sort of framework to work with. And it just, I was reminded of it when you're talking about a task comes in and which column do you put it in.
Oh, brilliant! I'll have to have a look at that. I've never heard of that one before.
I'll try and find the name of the person who wrote it.
And we've got Outlook. Is that say no more Outlook to schedule tasks, or just trying to work that one out?
I think they're separate.
Ah, okay. So I don't know if say no more goes with the pig wrestling, or
say no more.
Say no more. Okay, right. Yeah, it's been a long day today. Yeah, so Outlook to schedule tasks is another one. That's one I used to use a lot. Office 365 focus time tool. I've not come across that tool, but it sounds like it could be helpful. Another personal Kanban, Jim Benson. Cool, lots of really good tips here that people are sharing. Has anyone got any questions that you want to ask about anything that I've covered today?
Actually, I have a question.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh.
Sure, go for it.
Alistair? Oh, okay. Yeah, I also tried several time management tools, and my impression is that there are so many projects, you know, that you come up with, and then they keep piling up, and I like the simplicity of the system that we set up, but I'm afraid that it will things will keep piling up in the backlog column if you have those projects, you know, because in the end they are just they are just like long-term things that you want to do or have to do at some point, but probably they don't belong there. They will just mess up your board.
Yeah. Do you know, another thing you might want to do in your personal Kanban is, I should really do this, is add a column at the beginning that says ideas. And then that can be a place where you just go occasionally for inspiration, but it's not necessarily on your backlog of things to do. And I think as well, like, you can think of things on two different levels. You've got your day-to-day tasks that you do, but then you've got your bigger, wider projects or goals that you're trying to meet. And you've probably got a decent amount of control on your day-to-day tasks, but sometimes the bigger things, the bigger projects that you're involved in, or the bigger goals, you don't have as much control over them. It might be somebody like a manager in your work that decides that. So sometimes it's like, if you want to change that kind of higher level stuff, you need to be speaking to people about that, and, you know, chatting to your manager or whoever is the person that is coming up with these kind of bigger sort of projects. So yeah, I kind of sometimes think about it on these two levels. There's the stuff that I'm in control of on a day-to-day basis, but then there's stuff that I might have to go and negotiate with my manager and say, actually, I've got too many projects on the go, I need to drop one. But it can be easier said than done.
Yeah, it's especially difficult, I find it in my personal life, but also in my professional life, because I have a lot of freedom in my job to how I spend my time and where I put the focus. Yeah. And so this happens in both professional and personal life, that there is just way more projects and to-dos than I can handle.
Yeah.
And the danger is always, if you, that's actually the reason, I believe, why I do use more than one time management system to somehow have a focus for the day-to-day tasks, and then also somewhere to keep track of the long-term project and, you know, long-term
goals and things. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And it's the thing is as well, a lot of us by nature are curious and we want to try new things. So, you know, we're often coming up with new things that we want to achieve or work on. And I think sometimes keeping them in a separate place or even in an ideas column can help you with that and differentiate between that versus the kind of the more day-to-day stuff. We've got any tips on time estimation from Matthew? So when you say time estimation, are you able to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sorry, just to interrupt. This is going to have to be our last question because Grace's Zoom is needed on the next hour call.
Okay, so
yeah, can you hear me, Suzanne?
Yes.
Yeah, it's literally like, if I'm, you know, I have a task to do, one of the things I struggle with sometimes is actually kind of correctly estimating how long it's going to take me, what needs to be done. I appreciate this is probably a separate topic, and certainly in
could do a whole
3
new talk
minutes,
on this.
not going to be covered.
Yeah. I mean, I guess two things really quickly, I would say, and things that probably come from Agile estimation. One is maybe comparing it to something else that you've done previously, because often people find it easier to sort of compare two things and say, oh, that's twice the size of that, or that's 3 times the size of that, or that's half the size. So using a bit of your previous data, but also just comparing it to other things to help you size it. So that might be one way. I think we are, as humans, very bad at estimating in general. It's really difficult, and we're always optimistic and never learn from what we do in the past. So I think that can really help. I was going to share a second tip as well, and I'm trying to now remember what it is. But yeah, I think that's probably the main one I would do, is try to use other things that you've done before and do a bit of a relative comparison of estimation where you can. And actually, the other thing I've just remembered is, if you're working on something, if you can get other people involved in giving you their thoughts on the estimate, especially if you're doing something that's within the team, because we've all got the different experiences that we can kind of bring together and get a better estimate overall. But yeah, it's I think we are in general bad at estimation. We can't predict the future because we don't know exactly what's going to happen.
That's great, thank you.
Cool, thank you everybody. Thanks for joining. It was nice to meet you all, and hope this is useful to you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was a great session. Recording will be available on the YouTube channel. Thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy the festival. More sessions to see if you want.
Thank you, Jo.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.